All right, welcome to the MLB DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith. This main slate is super tiny with 4 games. Is it even worth going over? I don't know, kind of. It should be fun. It's baseball, right? So let's dive into it. Let's not waste much time other than the fact I will say DFS Hero does sponsor this video. Really good lineup optimizer to use if you don't have one or if you're looking for one. 15% off to try ours. Hit the video description link below. All right, Taylor, let's get into it. Pirates visiting the Nationals. This game has a total of 8.5. Looks pretty split here. But starting on the Pirate side of things, we have Martin Perez leading the way. Any interest in Perez at all today?
Let me see what I got him at. 14%. So a little bit, just because it's a 4-gamer, I guess. But, you know, he's never a guy that really stands out. Ground balls, no strikeouts. Not the greatest spot, so certainly not someone worth prioritizing. But if you're entering a bunch of lineups, I guess you can give him a little sprinkle.
Yeah, I think the reasoning to maybe do that is that the Pirates are coming up as major chalk. Let me actually refresh everything at DFS Hero right now. I can grab the stack IQ percentages, and I'm pretty sure it has not changed because it's slate small. Okay, they're pretty split with Pittsburgh is split with KC, which makes sense. They are not historically great offenses, but they are in really good spots, and relative to the slate, they do look good. So the weather is not great there. It is going to be raining and it's cold and the wind's blowing in. So, I mean, you could roll that all together and talk yourself into Perez. He is 7K and it's a small slate and he's not going to garner much ownership. Other than that, though, no. Right? I mean, it is a small slate, GPP season. For those reasons, you can consider Perez, but I'm with you. Like
Washington also doesn't really strike out, like 20% against lefties. So, that's a bad lineup, I guess. So
score a lot.
Yeah, there is that. They just most of the power is left-handed too.
Right. I think this is more of like you're not really necessarily gonna be stacking Nationals. I don't think. But I don't think you really need to go to Perez on the slate. Obviously, the Pirates are chalk. Maybe relay to people watching why we should be interested in the Pirates and maybe why not.
It's just the nature of the slate. The matchup's fine too. Josiah Gray, lefty power's given him issues over the years. The Pirates, 1, 2, 3, 4, how many lefties? At least 4 lefties in the lineup, toward the top of the lineup. Cruz, Reynolds, Sawinski, and Tellez all in the top 6. So they all have power. Pirates chalk's not comfortable, but matchup's fine enough. Josiah Gray has been kind of boom or bust over the years. He's got some strikeout stuff, but hasn't really shown it consistently since 2021. So, I understand why they're chalk. It's not comfortable chalk, especially since the Pirates do strike out quite a bit, but their team also had a decent 175 ISO against righties last season and this season combined. So, yeah, the issue is O'Neill Cruz and Brian Reynolds are expensive, but there's really not much else to pay up for on this slate, so I get why they're popular.
Yeah, I mean, Rowdy looks good, 174 ISO. Sawinski looks great. Cruz looks good. I mean, they do just look good. It is what it is. This is the slate we've been handed. They do look good. I will note Josiah Gray does have a 22% whiff rate against lefties, so it actually is setting up as a not necessarily bad matchup for him. He does have a higher walk rate against lefties and a higher ISO against lefties too, though. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. It is a spot where it could go well for him because he can rack up Ks when he's on. But I would absolutely lean Pirates over Gray today, and obviously you're in agreement. On the other side are the Nationals.
Gray's like 25% on too, so like
really?
Both sides very chalky. Yeah, just because the slate's pretty gross.
Okay, perfect opportunity to say, why are we punting SP2? I don't see a reason to punt. Go get the 2 best pitchers that you like on this board. I have no problem with it if he wasn't owned, but now that he's 25%, I'm like, no way. I don't want anything to do with Josiah. I guess the outside of the ownership, it would be because the Pirates are super chalky. So if you want to leverage that, but is it even leveraging it that well when he's that owned? I don't know. On the other side, offensively, the Nats also don't look super appealing. Perez is a pretty good pitcher to face historically, but it's not like he's a total dumpster fire either. He kind of just like survives and just like works his way through 5 innings usually when he's out there. How do you feel about Washington overall?
I think Lane Thomas stands out, as he generally does against lefties, hitting at the top of the order. Otherwise, their power is really left-handed. Gallo, Winker, C.J. Abrams, all without the platoon advantage. So it's not a good spot, but I think you're just getting to them because they're cheap for the most part, and there are only 4 games on the slate. So not a priority. They're in about, let's see, of the 3,000 lineups I'm looking at, Washington stacks are in about 24% of them, which is 4th highest on the slate. So Pittsburgh's coming in at the top for me. Washington, more of a secondary stack.
Yeah, I'm very much with you. I don't really want to stack them, but I don't mind getting to Lane Thomas or Riley Adams. He has a 232 ISO against lefties. So that's pretty inviting, especially at catcher with Wilson Contreras not playing today. So if you're looking at like secondary stack and like isolating bats or this honestly is a slate where you don't have to go a full 5 -X or 5-3 or whatever. You can really kind of do whatever you want on a 4-game slate. Worth noting, Joey Gallo, 40% whiff rate against Southpaws last year, but he had a 220 ISO. So he is actually still kind of interesting as a lefty versus lefty play for GPPs. Not really somebody I'm prioritizing, but just throwing that out there. All right, next up we have the Indians and the Twins. Obviously, the Indians don't. Or the Guardians. So sorry. Okay. The Guardians and the Twins. So 2 really good pitchers on tap here. They're going to be owned. So starting on the Cleveland side, are you going with their pitcher and are you stacking up Guardians?
Yeah, I think Bibby's my highest owned player on the slate right now for 9-2. Just he's a good pitcher. Didn't do well the other day against Oakland, but it's a new day. And obviously it's kind of slim pickings at the high end, so I'm fine with him. Cleveland is my 2nd highest owned stack. Of course, that's direct leverage against Pablo Lopez, who's the top pitcher on the slate and should be the most popular by quite a bit. Cleveland's just kind of a good lineup with very low strikeouts against right-handers, 18.4%. Since the start of last year, Lopez certainly good enough to do damage against them, but if they're going to be contrarian, it's a pretty decent lineup overall with the sea of lefties they're going to throw at him. So, yeah, I'll be into them just kind of as a pure leverage play.
Yeah, I don't have any qualms with that. I'm not really going to tell anybody to stack Guardians against Pablo, and I'm not going to tell anybody to not use Pablo even if he's chalky on the slate. He might have the best ceiling. I love Bibby here. The Twins actually grade out really, really well against right-hand pitchers, and they do have power, but this matchup favors him greatly. So I like this as a bounce back spot for him. Incidentally, as a bit of a leverage play, the Twins are right now the lowest owned stack of the slate. So Bibby is coming in at ownership. What is he at? 29%? I mean, he's fairly owned. The ownership is kind of split up top between like 3 or 4 guys, but that's relatively chalky. So on a 4-game slate, you absolutely can just like screw it. Let's see if the Twins bats come to play and target Bibby here a little bit. But I like Bibby. I'm probably locking him in as my top pitcher today. On the other side, how are you feeling about Minnesota for the bats?
Let's see. I said I had a lot of Bibby, so I really don't have much of them at all. I think they were my lowest owned stack. Yep, that's the case. They just strike out quite a bit, 26% against righties since last season. You mentioned the power is there. It is a good lineup with plenty of lefties they can throw his way too. So I get it. They're not going to be very popular, but I prefer to get leverage with Cleveland instead of Minnesota.
Yeah, Bibby last year did not give up much power at all to the left side of the plate, and that is where most of the Twins' power resides. So, I mean, he's got a low walk rate, he's got a decent K rate, and like you said, 25% strikeout rate for this lineup here, and they're pretty lefty heavy. So they always could do it. It's a 4-game slate. You probably have to consider just about every stack, but the Twins are very, very low in the pecking order for me, and Bibby is my number 1 guy. So I think we're aligned there for sure. All right, moving on. We got Marlins against the Cardinals. Let's see, who are they pitching? Ryan Weathers. Okay, so stack up the Cardinals. So I don't really see much to like about Weathers when I look at this matchup. He's facing a pretty righty-centric lineup that has a decent amount of pop, and they do not strike out a lot. That's bad news for a guy who does not strike out righties, does walk way too many batters on both sides of the plate, gives up a monstrous ISO. It all looks bad for Ryan Weathers. Obviously, it's baseball. Any good-looking stat can fail, but, I mean, Cardinals look great, right?
Not great to me, just because they have very little power in the lineup beyond like Goldie. Arenado seems kind of washed at this point. Contreras not playing, like you said. It's really not a good lineup. Like, they don't strike out a lot, but there's really not much power either. So I think Weathers is playable just because it's a gross slate and he's 6'2". In theory,
I don't want to play him, but I do acknowledge the loss of Wilson with his hand injury is important. He's got the best ISO the Cardinals have to offer against lefties. So maybe not as a full stack, but I would definitely be picking my spots here with Nolan and Goldie maybe. Full stack's still in play.
Right now, he's my third highest owned pitcher.
Oh, well, I'm definitely on the Cardinals side of that regardless, just because I don't trust him whatsoever.
The way I play is pretty high risk, high reward. So that's explaining a lot of this. Like, the Cleveland stuff obviously is high risk too, and it's just the nature of the game.
Well, for sure. I mean, when it comes to baseball, it's a very, very high variance sport, so you have to take those risks, which we've been talking about for like over a week now, how the chalk keeps hitting. It's just insane. So, like, usually for GPPs, you want to be underweight on the chalk or fade the chalk entirely, not pitchers necessarily, but for the chalk offenses. So that hasn't been really paying off lately, but your strategy paid off yesterday, so that was nice. Okay, so on the other side, the Marlins, another team I actually like quite a bit. They have several lefties they can throw at Lance Lynn. He is a decent pitcher, but he struggles mightily with lefty power. So, yeah, I mean, Lynn's viable because it's a small slate, but I actually like the fish here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't mind the lefties, Chisholm, Arias, Josh Bell even, just because Lynn has had those issues forever, but I'm more on the Lynn side personally. He still shows some decent strikeout stuff. Miami is just not a very good offense. It's not a good ballpark today. They strike out. They're pretty average for strikeouts. Obviously, Arias at the top is someone that never strikes out at all. But yeah, this offense doesn't look good to me either. I'm more likely to play Lynn than stack Miami.
Well, for tournament's sake, let's see here. For stack IQ, the percentages, they're pretty low in the pecking order. Let's see. Yeah, they're like the fifth on stack. So that's kind of interesting to me on a 4-game slate. But I hear you. Lance Lynn is still decent, so it's tough to completely pick on him. All right, last game of the night. This is where a lot of the focus is with people really, really liking Seth Lugo. Last time I checked, if we look at pitcher ownership across the board, Pablo leads the way, and right behind him is Seth Lugo as far as projection and ownership. So Seth Lugo is taking on the Chicago White Sox, who are terrible. Luis Robert is probably the only guy that really stands out. White Sox stack is somewhat interesting on a small slate because Lugo is going to be really chalky, and that's immediate leverage if it pays off. So how do you feel about Lugo and that that logic? How do you think he's really safe tonight, or do you have a little bit of interest in White Sox stacks?
Kind of both. They're my third highest owned stack right now. Again, it's a pure leverage thing just because he's going to be popular. I'd much rather plant my flag with Bibby than Lugo. Lugo is just kind of a guy, and if it was a bigger slate, he probably wouldn't be popular at all. But because it is what it is, he is popular at 8.3. And he's a fine play. Like, I will have him in some lineups. I have about 25% of him. But if I was going to play one lineup, it would probably have a White Sox stack and not Seth Lugo in it. Yeah.
Seth Lugo, exactly. He's a good play relative to this slate. On a bigger slate, you wouldn't even consider him. Well, that's not necessarily true. The White Sox are bad enough that you kind of consider whoever's pitching against them, I think. But for a tiny slate like this, the White Sox are the second lowest owned stack of the slate, and you have major leverage if they pan out. It doesn't look good. They probably won't, but I definitely am going to have a sprinkling in
I
tournaments.
should probably Cleveland is a better offense, and as such, I'm more likely to play them in one lineup than the White Sox if I'm looking for leverage. But Chicago does look pretty good from the same perspective.
Yeah, and Cleveland actually, great call, by the way. They have the best stack leverage percentage of the entire slate. So that is obviously very interesting. Kind of helps when you face the best fucking pitcher, right? So who's going to be super on too. So I agree at this point, Cleveland does look a little bit better, and they are a more reliable offense in general. All right, last team of the night, we got the Royals on the other side. They are facing who?
Mike Soroka.
He got bombed in his first game of the year. Obviously, this is a slightly less dangerous spot for him, but I don't think it looks any better. He just does not look good across the board, and the Royals actually have a considerable amount of pop and don't strike out that much. So they're pretty chalky too. Like I said, they're split with the Pirates. So how are you feeling about KC chalk, and do you like Soroka at all?
No, I'm not going to play him, really. He's like the one guy that I'm not getting to at all. I'm also under on Royal stacks, which is a little scary because they do look like the best offense on the slate. But generally, I'm going to fade chalky offense, especially on a tiny slate like this, and just hope that they fail this one day. They do have a lot of power, like you said. It is a good spot, so I don't blame you if you want to play them. I'm just personally unlikely to be even with the field, or certainly not above it.
Yep, I'm in 100% agreement with you across the board there. All right, that's going to do it for us for our game-by-game breakdown. Hopefully it helps you a little bit piece together your lineups. It is a small slate, so may variance be with you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Good luck tonight.